Oh,
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah. I'm here with the fabulous Jennifer Mercado, who I met through the Boss Talks Network, and she is absolutely a boss. And we are going to talk about being the boss of our own bounce back journey, the boss of our goals, the boss of our journey in how we make priorities, how we reset. Because Jennifer and I were talking in both real life and in the podcast about how sometimes we can end up with a toxic relationship with our goals. We felt things were
yes.
going to end up one certain way. We were like committed. We were like hustling. We were like ready for it. And the beauty and ease and real intelligence is taking a step back sometimes and saying, you know what? I may need a reset.
Yes. Absolutely. And reset, recalibrate, like all the R words can be in it. And when I was journaling, I'm like, I'm going to receive something better. I'm going to
Mm.
recalibrate. I'm going to realign. And it's having that recommitment to yourself that, okay, this was the plan. Maybe this was your intention. Um, but there wasn't enough room for the universe, God, to put its magic in. So while you are steadfast in, well, this is what I had planned and this is what I'm working for, and it's not working, and why is it not working? It's like, oh, let's reassess, take a step back, just like you said. And if it's not that everything is meant to be easy, but know your struggles and know that when you hit that wall and there's no more for you to go, there's, I think, huge growth in being able to say, okay, I surrender. This is not for me. Let's regroup. So yeah, I love that. Absolutely everything that you said, and working towards that. I think even with different identities that we have, right? Like I'm kind of just jumping in, like I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a business owner. I've had multiple careers. And I don't think that I've ever been as challenged as being an entrepreneur and a mom, and my kids are young. So
Uh-huh.
having all of that come to a head, for their sake and for my sake, I'd rather, kind of take a step back and say, well, maybe these aren't the goals for me, as opposed to, when I was young and brass and saying, oh, I'm going to get there no matter what it takes. I don't care who I have to take down, what blood I need to, scorch on the earth. I think that mom and that woman in me, and the age for sure, having been through what I've been through and understanding, like, okay, it doesn't have to go this way. We cannot continue to stick a square hole in a round peg. It's just not, that's not how that works. So it's really important to have that wherewithal where you're understanding, you're receiving, signs either from the universe, from friends, from people around you, from the people who are coming into your life that don't look like maybe the people you thought you were going to be with, and then from the voices within yourself and from your instinct to say, okay, something here doesn't fit. And I don't think it's everyone around me. It could be something that I've attached to so strongly, that just isn't working out for me, and it becomes a toxic goal.
Which is what I call smart girl syndrome. All right. So it's like, oh, if I just work harder, if I just this, and it's like, okay, maybe the goal wasn't the right goal in the first place, or
Hmm.
maybe it was the right goal, but it's not right for this season of my life.
Yeah, I 100% believe that that's true. You can have the best intentions too with wanting to complete that goal, or maybe it's like the next, obvious goal, like, oh, I've done this last year, so then that means that this year this is what my next goal is. And it's like, well, maybe your path isn't the same as everyone else's, and it's
Mm-hmm.
okay to try something new that looks different. But that's even scarier, right? Because there's no actual trajectory that's been done. So it takes that patience and that grace with yourself to let things fall by the wayside, because you're like, okay, that's not the path for me. This really seemed like a good idea at the time to focus my intention and all of my hard work towards this one thing, but it's not a thing. And I think that the fear that shrouds having that decision is, the shame that, oh, you gave up too easy, you defeated yourself, you didn't make the goal because you just couldn't do it. And I think that there's a lot of humility in saying, no, I honestly put my best effort, right? And you know yourself enough to know, yes, I've put my best self out there. I've done the things that I thought would generate more business. I've done the things for prospecting. I had solid leads, because I'm in real estate. That's why I'm using that terminology as well. And nothing is solid until it's in paper. And even then, you can have a deal collapse at the closing table. Nothing you could have done there. So I think it's having that detachment that you are not that goal. Your worth is not attached to getting that goal, but that you yourself as a human being are being called to certain things to do, manifesting themselves in goals or visions. And if you change, that naturally has to change as well. And it's you understanding that it has nothing to say negatively about you. You're just changing, and we're allowed to change.
I'm so glad you said that. A lot of my listeners, though I talk about business stuff a lot too, a lot of my listeners would have a toxic person in their life that they thought, okay, I've got to be a really good daughter, for example. So if I'm just nicer and kinder and I realign this, then I can, or I've had better boundaries or whatever it is, that I can have the relationship with my mother or my husband or my whoever that I was hoping to have. And they really, that same hustle and grind, they try to put it into changing another person's personality. Like, we don't think about it in that way.
Yeah.
But really, that's kind of the objective or goal, which obviously ends up being toxic to ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're not allowing that person to change within their own realm as well, right? Relationships change, people change, the way we communicate changes. And I think that in respecting somebody who might have been different or is now asserting themselves in a different way, the reaction shouldn't be, or I don't think it's wise to be, you doubling down on your assertiveness because that's how you're going to rein them back. And the same with business, right? I'm not going to double assert, because if the reaction that I intended for wasn't received at my first trying to be assertive and trying to do things differently, then how does it make sense to do that even harder? It's
I just
one of
want
those things that,
to. Okay.
yeah.
Yes. Okay. And I mean, so I was in a podcast, I think sometime this week. I do obviously do this a lot. And they said, if you could leave our listeners with one thing, what would you say? And I would say, if it's not working, try something else. Like, don't
Yes.
try the same thing again.
Or harder. Yeah.
Or harder. Right. And but we
Yeah.
just don't, I don't know if we just don't say that out loud, or it's just our conditioning, or we just think, well, that's just what humans need to do. But it's like, if it's not working, try harder.
Correct.
But it can be try something else.
It could be try something else. And I think that also part of the hesitation of us doing something new is that we already have evidence that this thing worked once. So our brain is already like, oh, hey, but you did this before and that worked. Do it again. And your brain is not, able to fill in the blanks in a positive way of trying
Sure.
something different. So it fills in the blanks in a negative way, like, well, this is the only thing you know how to do, so you can only do this. Where you as a sentient being, you're like, wait a second, brain, I see what you're doing. And we've seen that works, but that can also stop working, right? Like medicine, people either having
Sure.
glasses or not having glasses. Like there's so many things that we can say, well, that worked at a time and then it didn't. So I think that it just goes down to, you have evidence of, a mailer that went out and you got a really good lead. So you're going to keep doing that. That's the thing that works. When that stops working, it's okay. I'm going to go to the other thing now. That's not where my people are. That's not how they're finding me. I will reach them in another way. But again, it's that trap that you've seen it work once before and your brain knows, hey, this is safe. We've done this before. Let's do that again, even though you're not yielding the same results.
Or it's supposed to work, or somebody told me it should work, or it's not fair, it's not working, right? I mean,
Right.
all those traps that we can fall into. So let's talk about rebirth, okay? I'm Jennifer, I don't know that you know this about me, but my company's name is called Bounce Back.
Yes.
Okay. So that was kind of the original thing that I was doing. It's like, oh, I'm going to help people bounce back. And that's gone a variety of ways. But I think you've had a recent calling in your own life about redirecting and kind of rebirthing what this next version of you is going to look like.
Yes. And it's fun and exciting. And last week it was not
And
fun and
terrifying.
exciting.
Yeah.
Yes. So I went through stages where I was like, no, I don't want to do this. And then I don't know how I'm going to do this. And now it's like, oh, it might not be so bad, right? But I think it came from shedding what I thought it was going to look like, what I supposed it to look like, what I was willing for it to look like. I think once I stepped away from that, then the rebirth looks a lot more attractive to me now than it did last week. But I want to say at the beginning of this year, I never plan the way I planned for this year, which I knew was red flag number one for me, because I'm like, we're doing something different. And I've done this before in a way and it didn't work out, but we'll go with it. So I planned out my whole year into quarters, when to do marketing, when to do different events. Because again, Boss Talks in real estate. So making sure that my calendar is balanced with both, with my kids, family time. And come January, we had this planned trip to go to New York for my niece's first birthday party, and New York shut down. And the venue, wasn't allowing my sister to have it. And she had a bunch of people RSVP canceled. And then that trip was canceled. And I was like, oh, buddy, this doesn't feel good. The first thing that I had planned and in my calendar, and I'm just like crossing things off. And that was literally the trend for the beginning of the year. Things that I had planned, events that I had already scheduled, just things that felt that were going to happen. Literally all of them were canceled or postponed. So that was my January. And I was like, this is not good. I don't want to have to replan. I have this goal. Like I want to make this much money by this time. Like I need to mail out this thing by this time. So like all the wheels were just starting to like clang against each other, that there was just no ease in this. There was just a lot of friction and a lot of resistance, which I was not ready for. Come February, more of the trips and events that I had planned came to fruition, but I felt myself being pulled in so many different directions by them and feeling so many different aspects of my soul being called to that I wasn't before. And I was like, oh, well, this is different, because I didn't know that I was going to enjoy this part of what I do so much. And I also didn't know that I would talk to people who would bring more space and safety in conversation to allow me to honestly say what it is that I really want to do, which is now singing and performing. And I can say that out loud and not shrink and not get afraid by it.
I love it. Oh, that's so exciting.
Oh, I got chills because it's such a little known fact, but I've been singing since I was 3. Like my mom has VHS tapes of me singing around the house, like doing house tours at 7. And I think it's something that I love so much that I guarded and defended and hid. And it's like, well, I'm good at this. Let me do that. I'm good at that. I'll do that. So I think in February, meeting you and the amazing people and women that I met this year, it made it okay for January to be a wash, and for me to understand that who I want to be is kinder, is more creative, is more in flow, is a much more compassionate mom, is a much more less in control, less grippy, right? I feel like when I was talking about January, like I was just grasping onto straws, holding on to anything that I had intended to happen so that I can say, you see, it worked, and then none of that worked. So this past month has just been a slow release of little by little. This might not be the goal. This might not be the vision. This might not be the thing. This might not be the circumstance, and easing my grip so that whatever is meant to come and whatever is going to enlighten that rebirth and really give it the direction that it needs to take, as opposed to the direction I want for it to take, being open and receptive to receiving that, as opposed to crumbling, which is what I felt like doing.
Yeah, and I told you a little bit off camera about my January. So I actually did kind of what you said, last fall. So last year was crazy. I had my book come out, like the podcast was just booming, like all is well, business is great, blah, 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 blah. And then my husband changed jobs. And like I had taken off some time with the kids in the summer. And so then they were settled back into school. And I was just like ready to go. Like, let's go, let's do this. I had such a great beginning of the year. I was ready to hit the second piece of the year. And my husband changed his job. So he has worked at the same company for 20 years. He's doing consulting now. All is well, all is great. But he had like 3 months off work. Let's talk about how fun it is to work from home with your husband who's not working.
I do that right now.
Right? I mean, I just turned into a terrible human. Like I was just like, okay, well, you can work with me. We can do this. We can do that. He was like, you're being really aggressive. And I was like, which is not something I'm usually described as, but I was so like geared up for that next round.
Right.
And then, and it didn't turn out that way. So I was like, okay, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to just enjoy this space. I'm going to enjoy this time. There's no reason I can't, right? He's going to be back at work soon. He was paperwork for the new job and that kind of thing, so we were traveled, we did this. So then by golly, January, I was ready to hit it. Like I was in it. Let's do this. So in the month of January, I had I tested negative for COVID, but I feel like I had it at some point, but two terrible sicknesses, just like coughing, terrible sicknesses, whatever. At one point I had an eye infection, so I couldn't use my contacts. So I couldn't see. I didn't have glasses at the time. I now do. But I literally couldn't drive my children around. Like I couldn't put my contacts in. So I was like calling in friends and family and neighbors, like, please help me keep my children safe. Then I had carpal tunnel. So I had to wear a brace. So I couldn't type. I couldn't use the computer. I lost my voice, which as a podcaster and coach is literally terrible. So it was like, and then I told you recently that I was like, okay, I'm going to finish the book. I'm going to do this. And woke up at 3 a.m. throwing up. Like, I am a healthy human. My assistants and my family and stuff are just like, what is up? And it's not the same type of sickness where it's, like one thing that it's obviously I need to get checked out. I have been to the doctor, but it's just been like one thing, just this weird knocking
like a domino
down.
effect. Yeah.
Domino effect. Yeah. And Jennifer, what is crazy, you talked about you planning so much. So what is crazy for me is, guess what my word of the year was supposed to be? Or
was it planning?
Consistent. Consistent. Let's talk about showing up consistently with no eyes and no use of your hands
and no
voice and throwing up. Like, let's just chat about how consistent that is.
It's consistently different. That's the pivot, right? There was a consistent change in everything that you did.
Oh, it was just nuts. But I think that's a really important conversation, even for our listeners, because, we met in a setting that was very professional and very, a group of high achieving women, so I definitely think that it would be very easy to look at both of our lives and be like, well, they don't have any problems. Well, everything's just going so great for them. Well, this and that.
Yeah. And I think that that's a trap that I have myself too, right? Especially when you've had different identity shifts, which I know you can relate to that as well. Like who I am today is not who I've been my whole life. So whenever I had remnants of changing or like a new Jen would emerge, old Jen was still there and would ask like, well, is it really that bad? Or how lucky are you? Like, look what I had to go through to get to where you are. And I think that it's not just judgment from society. It's in a way self-imposed judgment as well, because we are empathetic and compassionate to other people, but at every level, it's a different set of issues. I think it's like new level, new devil. You're not sure what you're going to come across then, but that doesn't minimize the fact that it is a conflict that you're having, you're facing resistance, it is a problem. And I think that we should champion that more, that it doesn't matter what stage of life you might be, you're dealing with your own sets of problems, and it doesn't go away as you rank up and down, however you see that paradigm within yourself of going up and down and changing identities. There will always be some conflict, because through conflict we grow. But I love that you had touched upon that, because it doesn't take away from the fact that you had a really bad time and things that you had planned for and your business and your life, all of that came to a halt, not in a way that might be more permanent for others, and thankfully not in a way that's catastrophic. But at that time, it was resistance and it was a problem and it was an issue. And you had every right to feel as upset as anybody who would have been confronted with that. And that's something that I tell like myself and my kids too. Have compassion for yourself, right? Because when you have that for you, you can have it for somebody else, regardless of what they're going through. And even more so with people who might not understand where you're coming from, or your upbringing, or what position you're in now, or how your life has changed. We're all carrying that. And I'm very happy that you mentioned that, because it's something that I struggle with too, like minimalizing what I'm faced with now as opposed to what somebody else could be faced with.
My mom had a really good example about this. She said, if there are two people and one has cancer and one smashes their finger with a hammer, like they're hammering and they accidentally smash their finger, smashing your finger is a lot better than having cancer, but it still hurts.
Yeah.
And the person with cancer would probably still have compassion, oh man, your finger just got smashed.
Right.
That's terrible. It's
Right.
not as terrible as cancer, but it is still terrible.
Of
And
course.
and I also love what you said about new levels, new devil. Oh my gosh, that's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, that one, I'm in a coaching group with other women, and like when we go through up levels, when we go through identity
Yeah.
shifts, my friend Amanda, she's like, new level, new devil. I'm like, that's what it is.
Hmm.
I think, attached to the idea that a better self means 100% a better life, and it does to an extent until, like you said before, you hit that upper limit, and then it's time for you to move on, and that level pushes you on to the next thing because you've done the work. You're still going to have an issue. You're still going to have a problem, resistance somewhere, tension. Things are not going to be perfect. And actually, my friend yesterday was telling me, she's like, whatever it is that you're going through, know that growth doesn't happen in like, a peony or a posy or like on a lily pad. Like, it happens in the nitty gritty, the dirt, that tension, like in your shadows. So I think that, and I'd mentioned this before, offline, when we were talking about like my fetal position crying, it's there where I sat with my shadows, and I sat with my thoughts, and I sat with all the things that were coming to a head. And the one thing that just felt so easy for me was just to release it, to cry if I needed to not run to my kids immediately because I wanted to be with them. I was not fit to help with bedtime. Like, I didn't want for them to witness me like that, right?
Sure.
So it's having that wherewithal that, yes, this is a moment of growth. This is very uncomfortable. It's very painful, but mommy duty is going to have to just sit for 2 minutes so that I can release this and then come back to them fresh faced and not snap, and have patience when they want the same book read 5 times in Spanish and in English. And when they give me their breakfast order before bed, because they're like, oh, well, tomorrow I want this. I'm like, so I wouldn't have done them a service showing up in that space. But I did grapple with guilt of not being with them
Of
while I
course.
was going through whatever I was going through last night.
No, of course. And another thing that I do want to point out is you talked about old Jen, new Jen. I call, I told you about my name, and it's like Sarah Ramsey put up with things she never should have. Sarah K Ramsey knows better, and I'll talk about Sarah 2.0 and Sarah
Yes.
3.0 and Sarah 4.0. Like, I don't know what level I'm in now, but I do want to bring up the conversation because so many times we just didn't think of this as a kid, right? It was like you're either a kid or you're a grown up. And once you're grown
Mhm.
up, everything is figured out. You get married, you have kids. Not that life ends there, but like all the hard choices are supposed to already be over.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly it. And one of my favorite songs, I can put a song to this because I watch Disney movies, but in the second Frozen movie, Olaf has his song where he's like, well, this will make sense when I'm older. And I think
Mm,
like that's what we think as kids, like everything that we go through, like, oh, it seems really odd now, but like I'll figure it out later. Cause like when I get older, everything just makes sense and I just know things. And, people walk off with their briefcases and like everyone has somewhere to go. So I'll know where to go when it's my time. And that's not the reality at all. And I think that having that shift, and like having a different upbringing for myself now as an adult, and giving that to my kids from where, my mom didn't have, I think, the
mhm.
tools or maybe the articulation of what she was going through. It just helps me teach the kids that being an adult, we're not 100% figuring it out all the time. And that much like them, we're learning too. So like whenever, like if something happens and like I made a mistake or something, I tell the kids like, oh, I didn't know that. We all learned this together. How great. Like we're still
Mhm.
learning together. And for me, I want to like demystify the great, oh, she's an adult, a woman with a career and a husband and a house and kids. Like she's got it all figured. No, it looks really
Mhm.
nice and it took a lot of work. But even for my kids to never put me on a pedestal because mommy knows it all. It's like, no, I'm right here with you. I may be
Mhm.
taller. I may know more songs. I've been through school, which you still have to go through. But at the end of the day, we're still our inner child trying to
Mhm.
figure out what is going to make us happy, and that it's okay if it gets messy sometimes.
I love that. Jen, will you tell people where they can find more about you and more about your work?
Oh, how exciting. Thank you. So I have a website, it's jennifermercadorealtor.com, but I mostly dabble in social media. So you can find me on Instagram at the Jen Mercado. My YouTube podcast, which I will be inviting Miss Sarah K Ramsey to come onto mine. It's Red Carpet Living with Jen. And yeah, I think from Instagram and Facebook, it's Jennifer Mercado Realtor as well. But mostly social media is where you can find me.
So if we got to broadcast your voice to the entire world for 1 minute, what would be your message to everyone?
Oh man, that's
Oh,
not a
I've got
loaded
an idea.
question at all.
How about brunettes actually do have more fun than blondes?
Yes, brunettes do have more fun than blondes, and I was a blonde for my wedding, and I can tell you that we
What?
do. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was like, oh, man, Jen, we
I
like kind
again,
of twins.
that was old Gen point one, but yeah, I feel that we do have more fun because we don't have, I think, like the magnifying glass, unfortunately, that blondes have, right? Like you guys kind of stick out a lot, and there's like just constantly an eye on you, whereas like we kind of can dabble behind the scenes in front of the camera and really learn to blend and adapt in ways that we are not constantly self-conscious of doing that. So yeah,
Oh, wow. I was
I like
like
that.
being fun with my answer, and you like killed it. You just knocked it out of the park. But I am thankful. I'm sure you, like me, grew up with like the ideal was like Cinderella and like blonde hair, blue eyes. So I love the ethnicity of the world and the, just like
Yes.
there are beautiful hero. We had Snow White, but she's kind of lame. I mean,
Yeah,
now it's
super
like,
pale, super
oh,
pale. I'm like, she looked like she's dead all
yeah.
the time. Like, I need sun. I'm in Florida now, so I'm like, I love being out in the sun. But yeah, I love that you brought that up too, because visual representation is important. And I was Hispanic, right? We didn't have Hispanic princesses. We didn't have bilingual princesses. We didn't have, short prince. I'm 5 foot tall. Like all these princesses are like 6 foot tall. Like who's that tall? I'm not that tall. So yeah, so it's fun to kind of see how we have changed as a society, where it's like there's more representation for everyone, and not, well, that just looks really nice, and look at the backdrop, and we're good to go.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
And I loved having you here, Jen. Thank you for helping us figure out our toxic relationship with goals so that we don't end up with toxic relationships with ourselves. So,
Thank you so
um,
much. I loved being on. I loved our conversation. It's always to be continued. So thank you very much
always
for sharing this space with me.
awesome. And thanks for helping us become toxic person proof.
Yay.